At 1800, the Bull and Lieutenant Colonel Sidnor walked on the stage. The room got dead silent when the Bull began to talk. Bull was a man of few words. The briefing theater was a short walk from our barracks. Inside, it had rows of simple wood seating, like 2x10 boards on short metal poles, no seat backs. It would seat around 100. There's an elevated stage with a screen. We had watched a movie there just a couple days prior. Bull revealed a large map. It was the area around Hanoi. And he said, "We are going to rescue 70 American prisoners of war, maybe more, from a camp called San Tay. The target is 23 miles west of Hanoi. This is something our American prisoners of war have a right to expect from their fellow soldiers. We are all part of the same military family. We want these men to know that they are not abandoned by their military family. No man should feel that way. That's why we are going in there after them. You are to let nothing interfere with the operation. Our mission is to rescue prisoners, not to take prisoners. If there's been a leak, we'll know it by the time the second or third chopper sets down. If we're walking into a trap, if it turns out that they know we're coming, don't even dream about walking out of North Vietnam unless you've got wings on your feet. We'll be 100 miles from Laos. It's the wrong part of the world for a retrograde maneuver. If it happens, I want us to keep this force together. We'll back up to the Songkhon River if we have to, and, by God, they're welcome to come across that damned open ground. We'll make them pay for every foot across that son of a bitch." That is a reading from the book Who Will Go into the San Tay POW Camp, written by Terry Buckler, San Tay Raider, and Cliff Westbrook, son of a San Tay Raider. These gentlemen wrote this book, and they have been featured already on the Modern Military History podcast. If you haven't listened to it, stop and go back to podcast number 16, Into the San Tay POW Camp, with Terry Buckler and Cliff Westbrook. We are very lucky to have back with us today Mr. Terry Buckler, and what we're going to be going over today is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and what I think a lot of people will find interesting, hopefully for years to come. Some of the unique and incredible equipment that was used by these men to accomplish this unique and incredible mission. Terry, how's it going, sir? Welcome back onto the podcast.
It's going great. Pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be with you again.
Thanks for coming back. I shared that awesome quote from Bull Simmons, and I just wanted to share that because you guys had a primary mission when you were going into San Tay, rescue the POWs.
Correct.
And as Bull pointed out, things very well could have gone wrong. Thank God they didn't. But you guys also went in prepared to fight. And it's that duality, which meant you guys went in heavily armed and with some pretty serious firepower and with some pretty unique stuff to be able to accomplish your primary mission. So the point of this podcast is to kind of get into some of the specifics of the stuff you guys carried. Some of it was the first time it had been ever used by the U.S. military and set a precedent for special operations moving forward. So for my first question for you is, after you heard Mr. Bull Simmons give that talk, when did you guys kind of go and get your equipment together? Was it before that talk or was it after?
It was right after. In fact, Bull Simons told us that, we had a 50-50 chance of not making it back.
Yeah.
Anybody that wanted to back out now's the time to do it. One thing I might add is after Bull Simons gave that little speech, it got dead silent. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that auditorium. And then for about 5 seconds, it seemed like, and then the roof went off of it. everybody jumped up. I mean, it was, we had been training for 3 months to do some type of rescue. We had no idea where or who or what the mission was till that very night.
Mm-hmm.
And once we knew what the mission was, everybody was on board. And we had stored our equipment in one of the hangars that was close by. So Bull told us after he gave his little speech, meet up in the hangar, get your gear, and we're heading out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that quick. I mean, you actually didn't have time to give it a lot of thought as far as that's those words 50-50 chance of not making it back. When you're 20 years old, that kind of sticks in your brain a little bit. But I was with some great warriors, and there was no way I was going to let any of them down. And we had a mission that was well deserved, particularly when you look at what's going on today in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That would have never happened, should have never happened.
Yeah.
And it's a sad day for our country and for our military that those things have happened. But
the beautiful thing about sharing the Sante history is because it was such a bright light for our country. You guys going in there and risking it. The thing that really draws me to that quote in your book is Bull Simon's pretty much laying it out. He says, you guys have 50-50 chance. We're either compromised or we're not. In podcast 16, we really got into the prep that you guys went through. You guys trained at Elgin Air Force Base. Eglin. I didn't get it right. Eglin. And that was in Florida, right?
Yes, correct.
So you guys were training in Florida with the utmost secrecy, and even you folks didn't know what you were doing. So if you trying to minimize being compromised and walking into an ambush, but what I really think is incredible is that Bull Simon says, you know what? If we are compromised, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to make them pay. You guys had air power stacked up. You had so much air power stacked up that if you guys were with your back against the river, it would have been a pretty serious fight.
We definitely had air cover.
Mm-hmm.
Air Force did a fantastic job. The Navy, it was a joint effort. And, everybody contributed, and everybody wanted to bring them home. Our POWs deserved that.
Copy
and
that.
They were just a good group of men that had been through hell. You got to remember, some of these guys had been POWs 6-7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you put yourself in their shoes, you're beginning to wonder, is anybody going to ever come?
Yeah.
And as you well know from our previous conversations, the people that were on the raid. No, I don't. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. You're saying the people that were on the raid.
Yeah, they were really tuned in to bringing back those POWs, even though we didn't know at the time when we were training what we were going to do, other than some type of rescue. But when POWs was brought to our attention, that just upped the game for us. And, we were so happy to be able to do it, and happy. I mean, we were happy on the flight in and disappointed on the flight back, and it was a high, extreme high to extreme low that we faced. But when you talk to the POWs, they'll tell you it was the best thing that ever happened to them in the Vietnam War. So that brings it all to light for us.
Walk me through what you had on your person when you were getting on the chopper to finally go that evening after Bull Simons gave you the speech telling you finally. What were you carrying personally?
I had weight was an issue. on the choppers. You know, they wanted to make sure that if you notice, there was no steel pots worn. You know, I had 65 pounds of weight on me. I had a Prick 25, which is a radio, FM radio, and I was the RTO for the red wine element. And then I had ammunition. I had grenades, both concussion and frag. I had and Colt 45, and I had the radio that they use for down pilots and stuff as well. And what else did I have? A lot of ammo, carried a lot of ammo. And at that time, 30 round clips were really hard to come by. And I had two 30 round clips to start with, and then the rest were 20s. And I said two, and then I had two in my, we didn't have ammo pouches for 30 rounds, so we used the bags that Claymore mines were carried in. That we improvised with using those to carry the other additional 30 round clips I carried. So we had plenty of ammo, and I had about 14 concussion grenades and two frags. And
14. That's 4 concussion grenades.
Yes.
Oh,
right.
man.
Yeah, we were using those. We'd throw a concussion grenade in to a building, and then we would follow it. So.
What did those look like? Those little concussion grenades? Were they like just like little cylinders, like the?
Yeah, like a smoke. You know what a smoke bomb?
Yeah.
Smoke grenade looks like. Looks like a concussion. That's what a concussion grenade looks like at that time. And then we had the little frags as well. And like Dan says, if we're using the frags, we're going to be in real heat. So we didn't want to be throwing frags around, but the concussion grenades were very effective for us.
Gotcha.
And we took probably more than we needed, but it's better safe than sorry, so to speak.
Copy that. You know, it just reminds me of what Bull was saying. You know, we're going in to get the prisoners, but 50% chance we're in for serious fight. So you're carrying a lot of ammo. You said you're using 30 round mags. Correct. And at this time, the 30 rounders historically, they were just starting to get introduced to the military. How did you guys manage to even get the ones that you did have?
That's a good question, and I have no idea how we did it. But
there's just part of your equipment draw.
Part of our draw, yes.
Okay.
Right. And you mentioned the single point the scope that we used. That was not in the military's arsenal. We had to go outside the military to get that. And I have to tell you, that was probably one of the best investments the military had made as far as we were concerned, because Bull wanted to make sure that those scopes were sighted in at about 50 feet, that in a 3 round burst, you could cover, take your beret and cover it, the bullet pattern. So we had it locked down pretty tight, and a lot of our, I guess most of ours contact was pretty close. And, so the scopes helped us immensely improve our accuracy. We didn't have the night scopes or night headgear that they have today. Our headgear was lenses, used ski lenses from World War II. And they were basically just to keep the sand and stuff out of your eyes when the chopper landed.
I was going to ask about those. It's pretty ubiquitous in the photos of the raid that all these guys have these big ski goggles, either up on their forehead or they're wearing them. And there's amber lenses in those ski goggles and clear. And any idea why the amber was there at all?
Amber was a little better at night. You got to remember, when we entered the compound or the area, they had dropped flares over the compound, and those flares are extremely bright. And if you looked up at them, your night vision really got screwed up. So, during our rehearsals, when we dropped the little flares, you knew, don't look into the flare. It's kind of like, don't look at the light. It's going to blind you.
Sure.
So you wanted to keep your night vision as good as possible. So, but the ambers, and it was up to each individual. I prefer the amber over the clear personally.
Gotcha.
And,
So, go ahead.
but it was, we didn't have when you look at the Bin Laden raid compared to the Sante raid, they have all this radio equipment, and they had all of the night vision, and they had a great dog going in and finding lead for them.
Belgian Malinois, I think, if I think correctly.
Yes.
I'm a big advocate for people to go to museums, to check out artifacts. I'm really lucky because locally, our military history club has great swap meets where guys display their collections of stuff, and it's a great. I always tell my friends and anybody who's interested in what I do, come look at this stuff in person, because when you get to look at artifacts and engage with them, all of a sudden it's not just a podcast you've listened to. All of a sudden it's not just a book you're reading. It's like, this is real stuff, and it's hard for people to connect that dissonance. So that's why I think this is really cool. And I'm a gear nut. I love I just love this stuff. I love looking at the pictures and trying to figure out, what was used. And when you get really into the Sante raid, there's some things that you guys used that had never been, like the single point scope, and those were mounted on your Car 15s. And I wanted to touch on your Car 15. In my research on the Sante raid, and in your book, Who Will Go, you guys actually have it broken down. There's a picture of a Car 15, just like what you guys used, and it's all broken down what it is. Turns out they were actually Air Force issue Car 15 type called the GAU 5A.
Right.
And I'm curious, how did Army Green Berets get their hands on those things? Or if you know.
I don't know, but I can tell you, you got to remember who was in charge of this raid, and it was the Joint Chiefs of Staff. At a level that, you're now at the top of the rainbow, and so anything that you wanted, we got, and
get them some Car 15s. Oh, the Air Force has some? They're not using them because they're the Air Force. Let's take them.
Right.
All good love to the Air Force. Absolutely. They played a huge role in this mission, but they were flying airplanes. They were not shooting Car 15, so they could spare a few.
Right, exactly.
These single point scopes, I've been trying to kind of look up how the marriage of the Car 15 and the single point scope came to be. Were you issued your Car 15 with a single point already on it?
No,
okay.
We weren't.
When did you get a hold of that thing?
Well, our accuracy was pretty lousy. And Bull Simons, was telling people, we got to improve our accuracy and our hit rate. And that's when the single point was introduced. And I think maybe Dick Meadows might have been the one that found that. I can't recall exactly.
I wouldn't be surprised. Dick Meadows is an absolute legend.
Yes.
And a pioneer in the military and the special operations community. I wouldn't be surprised if he did some problem solving there.
Yeah. And so they ordered in a couple of them, and we tested them, and it was amazing. Wherever you put that dot, it was a green dot at night and red dot at day. And wherever that dot goes, it was actually kind of interesting because in your military, you're always, you're taught to shoot with one eye. And the hardest part for me was getting used to shooting with both eyes open.
Copy that.
In fact, you really didn't even use the scope. You couldn't look through it. You just put the dot where you wanted to shoot.
Sure.
And pull the trigger.
Right.
And so it really made it made it just so much simpler. And in a quick kill situation like we were in, that was fantastic to be able to enter a room, throw a dot on the spot, and it's going to hit right where you have the dot.
So you mentioned that your accuracy as a whole was suffering, and was this just because your guys are practicing at night?
Yes.
And iron sights at night are. I was never in the military, but firearms practice and target shooting is something that I really enjoy doing. I'm in the process right now of building a CAR-15 replica of my own, but it's the Army version with the forward assist. So pretty close to what you guys had. But at nighttime using iron sights, oh man, so it makes sense. You're going for a night raid, and what are some options? So you said you got the single point after you had been issued your CAR-15, you're working with it. The CAR-15 carry handle doesn't have an integrated mount. Who cobbled that together for you guys? Was it your unit armor, or were you guys left up to your own devices? How'd you mount them on there?
No, I'm not really sure who did that. That was above my pay grade. But the guys that I think it did some jury rigging, I said a couple of farm boys must have been turned loose on it and figured out how to do it. And
farm boys can fix anything.
Yeah. So once we got that figured out and mounted on there, it worked like a champ. And so it was one of those things that the guys had the option of going with the M16, whatever your weapon of choice was, basically. But the CAR-15, I liked it because it was compact. It had the retractable handle, stock on it. And, I had a radio on my back. And so I wanted something that gave me flexibility. And, we had...
you're carrying the weight already. You were carrying weight already with that radio,
And then you got your sling, and everybody had a different way of working their slings out, how it worked for you. There's a little sight up on the side of the AR, and then you have the back. So that seemed to work good for me. And then just wrap it with tape. Once you got it, the fit for you where it's comfortable, where you could grab it and swing it and use it effectively.
What'd you use for a sling? Like, what did you use? A strip of fabric? Did you use like a M16 sling?
Yeah, it was like the sling that came with the AR we used, or I used anyway.
Gotcha.
So it was green, inch wide sling, and but worked good. It was effective.
In the book, it talks about pretty soon after you got off the chopper, you used your setup here, and would you mind walking us through that? The real combat experience of using this setup of the CAR-15 with the single point.
Excuse me. Yeah. When we landed, Dan Turner, who was the captain at that time, and I was his RTO. He was in charge of the red wine element, and we were the last two off the bird. And when we were coming off the bird, there was a NVA that was taking fire on Dan as he was moving off the bird, and I saw where the fire was coming from, who was firing. And I was still on the tail of the bird, from where Dan had got out of the way. And, the proof of the dot worked perfect. I put the dot wire on his chest and cut loose with 3-round burst and goodbye.
Copy that.
Very effective.
And later, people really need to listen to podcast number 16 because we get into the raid itself. But later, Captain Dan saved your life when a guy was drawn on you in the compound. So these were definitely effective weapons that you guys were using. And thanks for really kind of helping me dig into the story behind the single point, because it was the first time they were used. And for people who don't understand what the single point is, I didn't understand it at first because it looks like your regular scope. Mm-hmm. And, now in the modern age, like you were talking about with the Bin Laden raid, we have modern optics. Our military has modern optics, and us as civilians, we can purchase, really modern optics that are a lot different than what you guys used with the single point. But with a modern optic, what it is it's a holographic dot that's superimposed like through a clear scope. So you're able to look through the scope and put that reticle on your target. But with the single point, this is rudimentary. Now looking back at the time for you, it was cutting art. It was on the cutting edge of technology, weapons technology. But it was like when you look through one of these things, it's just black with the red or green dot in the middle of it. And you can sight that dot, but how you use it is you open both eyes with your dominant eye, however, right or left-handed. You're looking through this thing, and that eye is just seeing the black and the dot. Your other eye is open, and you're able to put your vision together, which your brain naturally does, and that superimposes that dot over your vision. So it's kind of like a heads-up display, but your brain's doing it for you.
Right.
So you guys used the very first optics, like a red dot optic in the entire U.S. military's history. And now look, you don't have to be special forces to be issued an optic now in the Army. It's standard issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for fleshing that out. That is history right there. And effective history, too, from that story you just told.
Yep.
So
worked great for us.
Yeah.
Not good for the bad guys, but good for us.
Copy that. You guys were there to get those POW. And, you guys had the best equipment that the nation could provide. And Dick Meadows perhaps maybe had something to do with that single point acquisition. Now, you mentioned that you're using 30 round mags. And for the people who don't know, who aren't insane like me, and, really get into the gear of what was used back then, 30 round magazine pouches didn't exist at this point. The Army didn't make them because the 30 round mags were so brand new. I actually know a story of a SOG individual, John Plaster. He wrote to Colt along with some other guys who were operating in Vietnam and doing SOG operations. He wrote to Colt and said, "Hey, I hear about these 30 round mags. We could really use some." And they were sent some directly from Colt. So it makes sense that you guys didn't have ammo pouches for them. And you had these Claymore bags. Were they just like standard Claymore bags, or were they modified at all?
No, they just, the Claymore, it was kind of like a purse, if you will. Had like a shoulder strap you could put on it. And it was just a cloth bag. And you could put about 3 or 4 30-round clips in it easily. Now, you didn't really fasten it because there wasn't any fastener on it, but it worked. And when I got off the bird, I had a 30. You tape your 30 rounds together, so you can just flip it when you run out. And you know what? Yeah. One of the things that this was my first time in combat. So the old men were telling me, some of the things I need to do. For instance, your first 5 rounds you put in your magazine are tracers, and then you fill it with the regular shells. So when you get down to the last 5, you're firing tracers. You're ready to switch magazines. Yeah. So those were just little things that you learn through guys that have been there before.
Gotcha.
Kind of cut the way for us.
Gotcha.
So, and then the 30 round clips were, not everybody had them because they were that short of them. Yeah. So, but you did the same with a 20 round. You put, the first rounds you put in were tracers. So when you got down to the end, you knew the last thing you want to do is break into a room and go click. And
Yeah.
so those were the little things you learned to do. And frankly, after I fired, sometimes I would just I knew I was getting close. So I would just go ahead and change magazines just to make sure I had a full round in case needed it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So
Gotcha. So you said that you weren't wearing helmets to save
no,
weight. What did you have other than your goggles? Were you wearing like a cravat over your head, or did you just go just with nothing on your head other than the goggles?
goggles, and then we had the cravat for our face to cover when the choppers were
Oh, okay.
taking off and throwing crap up in your laying on you. But other than that, just jungle fatigues. We went in sterile,
Mm-hmm.
no rank and everything like that. And I guess the only thing I had a 45,
Mm-hmm.
a shoulder holster, looked like John Wayne, and uh, and then the knives we had for our own use if we
Mm-hmm.
needed them, but thankfully we never had to resort to that.
Oh, man.
But
Yeah.
uh,
Did you carry
what else?
water? Did you carry any water on your person?
No water, and then we weren't planning on being there that long.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Understood.
Yep. Uh, so let's see. We did have a little. Uh, it was like a jungle penetrator for if we did have to escape, or go through the jungle, and it would fire just a little 22 rifle shell, and it would fire for if you were messaging to a chopper coming back in to pick you up or
Is
something
this
like
like a
that.
flare, like a little
Yep.
pen flare almost? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, excellent,
Yep.
excellent.
Yep. Very small,
Mm-hmm.
single shot, but it had it would go up in the air considerably,
Mm-hmm.
so they could pick you up. Well, we never used it, but we did do some jungle penetration practice while we were doing our rehearsals. And let's see, what else do we carry? Uh, had a compass on, just a standard military compass.
Did you wear that around your neck on a string, or was it in one of those little
I just
pouches?
had a little pouch that
Gotcha,
it had,
gotcha.
and
What kind of pouches were you carrying your 20 round mags in?
just regular ammo pouches that
Gotcha.
the Army issued,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, what else do we have? Just trying to remember.
Well, we got a whole list here of some of the things that other guys were carrying, and it
Yeah.
gets pretty interesting. Some of the stuff that these guys were carrying
probably
was pretty unique.
Most interesting is probably Tiny Young with the acetylene torches. I mean,
Let me read here. This is on page 86 of your book, and this is literally the inventory of what you guys were carrying.
okay.
2 M16 rifles, 48 Car 15 rifles, 51 Colt 45s, 4 M79 grenade launchers, 4 M60s, 2 12-gauge shotguns, 15 Claymore mines, 4 demo charges, 213 hand grenades, including frag and concussion, 12 wire cutters, 2 chainsaws, 17
They were still chainsaws.
17 machetes, 11 bolt cutters, 1 heavy duty bolt cutter, 2 cutting torches, 5 crowbars, 34 miner's lamps. What were the chainsaws for? That jumps out at me right now. What were the chainsaws for?
Well, this is where we had some bad intel.
Mm-hmm.
The guys that were setting up the LZ for the choppers to come back into,
Yeah.
they were Ronnie Strahan was heading up that group, and we had the chainsaws were going to be used to cut down the light poles that were close to the compound where the choppers had to come back in to pick us up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the biggest problem we had, the light poles were not made of wood;
Mm-hmm.
they were concrete. So we didn't get a chance to use the chainsaws, but we had to move our LZ out a little further for the birds to come back and pick us up. But that was just, bad intel.
That was
It's
pretty
hard to
brutal.
tell concrete from wood, though, so I give him the chance to
Yeah,
recoup that.
you guys. It turns out had overall, if I understand, pretty great intel. You guys knew everything where it was,
Yep.
and big props, big props to the guys who made it happen, the intel
Oh,
guys who made it happen, vital
yep.
part of the team. But I gotta say, it's pretty brutal to see a chopper load of green berets jump out at you, and you're an NVA prison guard, and they got chainsaws. That's
Mad Max.
yeah.
Yeah.
And these cutting torches, what are these cutting torches for?
Well, we did not know uh, the intel that we had, or they had. We didn't know what was going to happen
Mm-hmm.
if the guards were going to try to execute the POWs, if there was a prison break trial
Yeah.
or rescue. So we had to be controlled. They felt like while we crashed inside the compound, Blue Boy was to gain control of the guards as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that by taking out two of the guard towers, and that an HH3 did, or H53.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they landed inside the compound, George Petrie's team was to execute the one of the towers that we weren't able to do without bringing injury to maybe a POW. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't know if the guards the doors would be locked or bolted with padlocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cutting torch was taken along with bolt cutters, and or if they were in chains and we needed to get it done, a bolt cutter wouldn't do it maybe, so we could cut it with a torch.
Wow. So you guys went in prepared for anything to bring those POWs home.
Yes. Had they been there, they would have been home that night.
Yes, sir.
There's no doubt in our mind. And, we had extra choppers in case there was more POWs than we expected.
Mm-hmm.
And, we could have brought them back. And it was just a situation where they had been moved and they weren't that far from us. Camp
Mm-hmm.
Faith was not that far it was about 6 clicks away. And I think had we known that, we would have said, let's go get them at night too. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. So
The fog of war.
yes.
The fog of war happened, and but one of the things that we really talked about on our last podcast, and that's podcast number 16, and Cliff was with us, and Cliff's dad flew in that
Right.
mission, and Cliff is one of the most knowledgeable people that I'm gonna brag about Cliff because he's awesome, but I like to read books and I like to know things. Meeting a guy like Cliff and how knowledgeable he is just makes you get so humble really quick, and he's a great guy too.
Yeah, he's a walking encyclopedia. The one thing about when Cliff contacted me, I'd been working on my book since 2012.
Yeah.
And when my daughter had gone to Afghanistan and started asking me questions about what I did, so I thought, well, I'll just write a book about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he had contacted me, and when I had requested some information from some of the POWs and the Raiders, and he wanted to know if I would send him my manuscript, which I did, and he wanted to know if it'd be okay if he did some editing. And I told him, I said, Cliff, whatever we put in that book has to be the gospel. There can be no grayness. And we have to be able to provide truth as to what we did, who did what. And I said, but I welcome you. And he did a great job. You know, he really forced me to write a better script,
Yeah.
and so I owe a lot to Cliff. He did
And
a great.
a little spoiler, and I think we're drawn to a close here on our podcast today. But a little spoiler: Mr. Terry Buckler and Cliff Westbrook will be coming back to the Modern Military History Podcast very soon with some other guests, and we will be talking about the Sante raid again in more detail, and Cliff will be with us again. If anybody who's listening to this, gets the itch, I really highly recommend your book. I mean, it is, as you said, in terms of the gospel, in terms of writing about this mission, coming straight from you, your story, your experiences. You have life lessons in here that you learned from, not only working on this incredible raid, but from your time in the military. It's not limited to you. It's got people who are POWs, people who are in all different parts of the raid, giving their testimonials. It's a pretty big picture. And for anybody who wants to learn about this raid, I highly recommend Who Will Go into the Sante POW Camp by you, Terry Buckler, and Cliff Westbrook.
Well, we tried to make it a readable book, and it's short chapters, lots of pictures. And our publisher did a great job of getting it done the way we asked them to do it.
There's great pictures in here too that unfortunately we can't show here. You have pictures of I just opened the book. I have it here with me because I was doing some reads. I just flipped to the original sales ad of the single point scope. Yeah. And, here's an October of 1970 Gun World magazine advertisement for it. I mean, you guys went all out here, and there's great photos in there. It is readable. I read a lot of history books, and some of them are written by guys who just, they're not thinking, what if somebody who isn't a pinhead picks this up? Are they going to want to read it? And
it's interesting. I'm amazed at how many women have read it and have enjoyed it. The wives of the POWs or wives of just friends of mine that, their husband read it and then they read it. And they, of course, most of my friends didn't know I could even write. So,
don't sell yourself short.
It was fun. So
copy that.
It's been a very enjoyable book. I'm glad I did it now, just for history and my family, and it's humbling to know that here I am, a 20-year-old kid working side by side by the legends of Special Forces. It's just I'm very fortunate and blessed.
Well, what you've done here is you've carried the ball forward for the entire community by doing the work you've done with this book. And you're a president of of a chapter of Special Forces Association.
Yes, Kansas City chapter.
Yeah. So you're carrying the ball yourself, and it's always an honor to have you on. I really appreciate your time. Before we cut it, is there anything you'd like to add, sir, before we end this one off?
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share the word on the Sante POW camp.
It's easy to do because it's just something I come back to is that POW rescue efforts during the Vietnam War were called Bright Light missions. That was the codename Bright Light.
Right.
And there have been books written. I've done a podcast on the Modern Military History Podcast devoted to a book called Bright Light, and it goes through chronologically all of the missions that this one author could get into. And some of them are pretty heartbreaking. How close they got to getting guys. And, with what the legacy of the Vietnam War being what it is, more people need to understand that the Sontaine raid was a shining bright light in our nation's history, and that you guys, just like Bull Simon said at the beginning of this podcast when I read that quote from your book,
Right.
we're going in, we've prepared for months, but it's 50-50. You can leave now, but if you go in, you have to be prepared to lay your life down for your countrymen. And you guys did that, so it is easy to give you guys the time, and I appreciate it, and I really look forward to our next project we're doing together. And I won't get too much into it now, but it is coming, and it is its own top secret mission. So we will work on that. And as always, Terry, it's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm going to close it out here. This has been Andrew with the Modern Military History Podcast. This has been a great time with Mr. Terry Buckler talking about the things he used and carried and some of the really amazing things he saw other guys carry during the Sontaine raid. Thank you, sir, so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Copy that.
Yep. Have a great evening.